The restaurant was full of light and quiet laughter when three small voices changed everything, and the millionaire barely had time to look up from his cup when the triplets leaned closer, their eyes wide with fear and hope mixed together, and one of them whispered, "Please, pretend you're our father," and in that instant the air froze, forks paused mid-air, conversations died, and he felt something tighten in his chest that money had never touched. He was used to people staring at him, judging him, wanting something from him, but this was different. These children were trembling, their hands clutching his sleeve like he was the last safe place in the room, and he stayed quiet, because silence had become his armor after years of humiliation he never spoke about, years of being powerful in public and empty in private. His name was Daniel, and despite the suits, the respect, the influence, he carried a quiet sadness that no one saw, a past shaped by a family that taught him love was conditional and easily withdrawn, and even now, sitting in this elegant restaurant, he felt small when voices rose, when eyes judged, when memories crept in uninvited. Across the room stood a woman in red, graceful, controlled, watching them closely, her posture perfect, her smile sharp, a woman who believed she owned every space she entered, including this one, and when her gaze met the children, something cold passed through it, something powerful and untouchable. The triplets pressed closer, their whispers shaking. "She's angry," one said, "she told us not to talk to you," another added, and the third didn't speak at all, just looked at him with eyes that carried too much fear for such a young face, and Daniel felt helpless, because he didn't know them, didn't know their story, and yet their fear felt familiar, like his own childhood had found him again in a different form. The woman in red took a step forward, her heels echoing softly, her voice calm but cutting. "Children," she said, "that's enough," and the way she said it made the room colder, made Daniel's stomach sink, because power spoken softly is often the most dangerous. He hesitated, because stepping in meant drawing attention, meant inviting conflict, and conflict had always cost him something, but then he felt a small hand grip his tighter, and the sadness inside him shifted, not gone, but changing shape, making room for something else, something fragile, and he cleared his throat, his voice low, steady. "They're with me," he said simply, and the restaurant didn't breathe. The woman smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes, and she laughed lightly, as if indulging a joke. "Daniel," she said, "let's not pretend," but the children leaned in closer, and he felt their trust like a weight he could not drop. People began to watch now, quietly, curiosity spreading, and Daniel felt the old helplessness creeping in, the sense that no matter how much power he had, someone else could still control the narrative, still make him feel small, and the woman's influence was clear, the staff watching her, waiting, the room bending slightly in her direction. He said nothing more, because patience had taught him that reacting too fast only strengthens the wrong side, and the triplets stayed silent too, their breathing shallow, waiting. As dessert plates arrived untouched and minutes stretched, Daniel realized this moment wasn't about pretending anymore, it was about whether silence would protect the children or expose them, and as he sat there, holding still, he felt a quiet hope rise where sadness had lived for too long, the kind of hope that doesn't shout, that waits, that endures, and across the room, the woman in red watched, confident that whatever game was being played, she would win, because powerful people always believe that, right up until patience proves them wrong. The woman in red moved closer, her smile polite and sharp, the kind that warned without raising its voice, and she placed a hand lightly on the back of one of the chairs, reminding everyone who she was, reminding the room where influence lived, and Daniel felt the helplessness deepen, because he recognized that posture, that certainty. It was the same look people wore when they knew they could erase a problem quietly. The triplets stiffened, their shoulders rising, and one of them whispered again, barely sound, "She'll take us away," and Daniel's throat tightened, because he had spent a lifetime watching stronger people decide fates over coffee and smiles. The woman spoke smoothly, saying the children were confused, that they were under her care, that emotions made kids dramatic, and the staff nodded, unsure, unwilling to challenge someone like her, and Daniel felt the familiar injustice settle in his chest, heavy and old. He wanted to explain, to ask questions, to demand answers, but he stayed quiet, because he knew how quickly words could be twisted, how easily a powerful voice could turn concern into accusation, and the children watched him closely, reading his silence, not as abandonment, but as waiting, because somehow they understood patience better than most adults. The woman ordered them to come with her, her tone firm now, ownership clear, and one of the triplets shook their head slightly. tears forming but not falling, and the room felt smaller, tighter, as if everyone sensed they were witnessing something they would later deny seeing. Daniel took a slow breath and did the only thing that felt right. He placed his hand over theirs and said calmly, "They can finish their meal," and it wasn't loud, it wasn't aggressive, but it was steady, and the quiet hope inside him grew just enough to keep him upright. The woman's eyes flashed, annoyance breaking through control for a brief second, and she leaned in, lowering her voice so only he could hear. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be," she said, and he heard the threat clearly, because influence always sounds reasonable when it's confident it will win. Time stretched, and minutes passed without movement, the children still, the woman waiting, the staff frozen between orders and conscience, and Daniel realized that justice rarely announces itself. It tests endurance first, it watches who can remain calm while pressure builds. He asked the children simple questions then, their names, their favorite food, who they lived with, and they answered quietly, honestly, without drama, and their answers didn't match the woman's story. Not even close, and the room began to shift, just slightly, because truth has weight even when whispered. The woman sensed it too, and her patience thinned, her voice sharpening as she demanded they leave now, but Daniel didn't move, and neither did the triplets, and in that stillness, the sadness that had shaped his life softened into something else, not courage exactly, but resolve, the kind born from too many moments of looking away. He knew he couldn't save them yet, not fully, but he could buy time, and sometimes time is the most powerful thing patience can give. Across the restaurant, people pretended to eat, but no one tasted anything, because the balance had shifted, just enough, and while the woman still believed herself untouchable, Daniel felt the quiet hope settle deeper, steady and warm, telling him this wasn't the end of the moment, it was only the beginning of waiting. Minutes stretched into an hour, the air heavy with expectation, and Daniel felt every second pressing against him, but he did not move, he did not panic, because he had learned long ago that panic feeds power, and the woman in red was growing restless, her perfect posture now edged with impatience, her lips pressing thin, eyes flicking from the children to him as if measuring whether he would finally break. The triplets clung to his hands, their small fingers curling, their whispers quiet but steady. Pretend. They breathed softly, barely audible, but enough to anchor him, enough to remind him why patience mattered. He spoke calmly, quietly asking them about their day, their games, their favorite stories, keeping his tone soft, human, steady, and the staff began to notice the mismatch between what they were being told and what was happening before their eyes. The woman's influence began to crack imperceptibly, a slight hesitation in her instructions, a pause before speaking, because she could sense that the truth had begun to breed in the room, and truth, once it starts, cannot be silenced by money or titles. Daniel watched her carefully, knowing she was powerful, untouchable in most situations, but even the untouchable can be unsettled when patience holds firm and justice hides in the silence. The children whispered again, glancing up at him with wide, trusting eyes, and he nodded ever so slightly, letting them know that he understood, that he was on their side, that they were not alone anymore. People in the restaurant began to notice, watching the subtle tension, the shift in the air, forks paused mid-bite, conversations stalled, and Daniel realized the moment was delicate. One wrong word could escalate, one raised voice could give her control back, but steady silence, steady calm, had weight. He guided the children through soft reassurances, telling them they could stay, that he would protect them, and each whisper, each touch of his hand, grounded them, and strengthened him in return. The woman in red leaned in, her voice sharp, threatening, trying to regain the upper hand, but Daniel did not flinch, he remained quiet, strong inside, and the triplets mirrored his calm, their small hands gripping his fingers as if they knew that stillness was safety. The restaurant had frozen entirely, not from fear, not from drama, but from anticipation, because everyone felt the stakes, everyone sensed that this quiet moment held more power than anyone had expected. Daniel waited, because patience was his only weapon against influence and arrogance, and slowly, quietly, that patience began to push back. The woman's control slipped further, her calm veneer cracking under the weight of the children's truth, the children's trust, and Daniel's steady presence, and for the first time, she hesitated, just for a heartbeat, enough to let hope settle quietly in Daniel's chest, small but unbroken, whispering that the moment for change had begun. The moment arrived quietly, without fanfare, as if the world itself was holding its breath, and Daniel felt it first in the shift of eyes around him, the way whispers rose softly, the way even the staff could no longer pretend ignorance. The triplets leaned closer, their small faces filled with hope, not demanding, not pleading, just trusting, and that trust carried a weight that no amount of influence could match. The woman in red tried one last time, a sharp word, a cold smile, a reminder of her power, but it no longer landed, because patience had built an invisible shield around Daniel and the children, and the quiet truth had begun to speak louder than her authority ever could. He whispered gently to the triplets, reassuring them, guiding them with soft words, and the children smiled shyly, pretending, "Yes, we trust you," pretending he was their father, and in that pretending, something real began to take root. The room seemed to breathe with them, every person sensing the fragile balance of power. Tipping, every observer realizing that influence can only stretch so far against courage and patience, and Daniel remained calm, steady, human, holding their small hands as if holding the future itself. The woman faltered, her composure slipping, her perfect red dress suddenly a symbol not of control, but of frustration, because she had underestimated the strength of quiet endurance, the strength of belief that the right thing will not be denied forever. People whispered, eyes darted between her and Daniel, and slowly, imperceptibly, respect for the children's courage and his steadiness began to replace fear. Daniel's quiet hope had become tangible, his patience had forced the room to notice, and the triplets, laughing softly, letting go of their whispers for a moment, had already won what words could not achieve. By the end of the evening, the balance had shifted completely, not with shouting, not with confrontation, but with steady presence, trust, and the unshakable bond between the children and the man who had quietly chosen to protect them. The woman in red walked away, her power diminished, her influence questioned silently by everyone in the room, and Daniel held the triplets close, not as a pretender anymore, but as someone who had become real to them in the truest sense. The restaurant exhaled, the invisible tension leaving the room, and Daniel knew that justice had arrived in the gentlest way possible, through patience, courage, and the simple act of listening and believing, and for the first time in a long time, he smiled not because the world approved, but because the children were safe, and that was all that mattered. The triplets whispered once more, almost shyly, "Thank you," pretending or not, and Daniel held them, knowing that sometimes, the smallest voices can change the largest spaces, and that real power lies not in control, but in love, patience, and quiet justice that no one sees coming until it is already done.